Hello everybody, welcome to Casa de Nerd, Here We Game. I am the Mad Irishman, and this is episode 2 in our series of Cataclysm Dark Days Ahead called Surviving the First Day. In our first episode we went through some character creation stuff and some other kind of formalities and things of that nature, and we got into the game. So I have done absolutely nothing with this. And I wanted to kind of talk about where to go from here. You've got your character, you've got this big world out there, and you have no idea how to get started. I'm going to help you. So the first thing we're going to do is examine the HUD, because there's a lot of information up here. You may not know what all of it means, but almost all of it is important in some way. So the first thing we're going to talk about, you get a little mini map in kind of the upper left here. Not, in my opinion, terribly helpful, but it's there. It is what it is. But next to it, you see where it says head, torso, left arm, left leg, right leg. These are very important. That's your health. You don't have a unified health pool of hit points in this game. It's all divided by these 6 key areas. Arms and legs can survive being broken, aka running out of hit points, but you will suffer pretty severe debuffs, but you will live, potentially. What you can't survive is a crushed head or torso. So the head and the torso are arguably the two most important. If the head or the torso goes down to nothing, you are dead. If your arms and legs go down to nothing, well, you're not immediately dead, but your chances of dying go up quite a bit, because that probably happened in a fight and you're probably still in a fight. So just keep that in mind. Also, the color dictates the condition. You can see that these are all green and full, and as they tick down, you'll see the bars tick off, and you'll also see it change to a lighter shade of green, and then into some yellows, and then into some oranges and some reds, before it finally conks out, and you'll see kind of squigglies across it, and then you know it's destroyed. Also, the colors of the names themselves are important. Right now they're all gray, which means they're fine. There's nothing wrong with them. When they turn red, the deeper the red, the more severely you have gotten a bleed effect. Bleed effects slowly tick health off. If you get a light scratch from maybe a rose bush, or you get hit by a zombie attack that maybe doesn't have a lot behind it, you may end up with a bleed, and you'll lose a few more hit points out of it. But as long as your health is at, say, this level, you'll probably survive it, and it'll clot on its own. More severe bleeds from heavier attacks, say gunshots, shrapnel, and the like, will require bandages to stem the blood flow and will deplete your health in that area much faster. Another color to keep an eye out for is blue. See where it says no style next to fists there? That color blue. When you see that, that means you have a deep bite, a deep wound, and you have to deal with that before it becomes infected. You have about 6 hours before it becomes infected, give or take. And there's a couple different ways to deal with it. You can cauterize it, which may make it better. It may make it worse. But antiseptic, hydrogen peroxide, that kind of stuff is going to be your best friend there. The other color is green. The same color green you see everywhere else right now. That means it is indeed infected, and you have about 24 hours before you are DRT, dead right there. So keep that in mind. Infections require strong antibiotics. Broad spectrum antibiotics will allow you to live longer, maybe another 12 hours for every dose you take, but you'll need full antibiotics in order to clear the infection. Over to the right of that, on the very right side, we have our strength, dex, int, and perception. These are important because these will change dynamically based on that little smiley face right there. That's your mood isn't the right phrase, but if we hit shift, helps if I hit the right key. If we hit V, it'll bring up our morale, and it'll show us various things that affect our morale. The higher our morale, the higher some of our stats might become. The lower the morale, same thing. And it will also be affected by pain. Pain is the big one. The more pain you're in, the less stats you have. So you'll see your strength and dex drop pretty significantly if you're in pain, which can mean the fight's over and you're already dead. Your body just hasn't caught up to the fact yet. So keep that in mind. Next to that, kind of in the middle there, we have focus. Your focus is your kind of ability to focus on what you're doing. The higher your focus, the more likely you are to earn skill points or progress towards leveling a skill. So you want to keep that up if you're doing anything that you might learn. So if you're crafting a cudgel, for instance, you're going to have a better chance to gain in your fabrication skill here, the higher your focus number is and the higher it stays throughout the crafting process. And don't worry about any of this. We'll come back and talk about all this stuff. Your speed is, that's how the way turns and speed work in this game are a little weird. But basically, oops, that is the wrong button. Your speed is kind of your base movement speed that you can move in one turn. So your speed is your base that you can move in one turn. So when I move around, you see how it's got 87 W? That's how many ticks you get 100 in a turn. That's how many ticks it takes you to walk that far. So the higher your speed, the less ticks it takes. It's hard to keep track of, especially on the fly. But that's basically where it is. If we switched over to run, see now it says 0R. It's taking me half the amount of time. So I could move 2 spaces and have a little bit extra before someone would get to take a full turn. And conversely, when we crouch, now it's taking 179. It's not quite double, but it's close to double. So it's a little weird, but the speed, you'll see that drop as you take damage or as you're drunk or whatever else. So you just have to understand that there's a correlation between speed and how fast you're actually taking your movement actions. Next to that, we have STM, stamina. That, you can see it's a little bit depleted because I had done a little bit of running there. Running depletes it, attacking depletes it. There's a ton of stuff that depletes it. Being overloaded, like you're carrying too much weight, will deplete it. Certain types of attacks will deplete your stamina, like if you get tear gassed or whatever. This is important because if your stamina ever goes down to nothing, you become winded, and it takes like 4 times as long to do any action, be it move, attack, whatever. And the zombies see that suspiciously the same as they would hear a dinner bell. You're in real bad shape if your stamina goes down to 0. So keep a very, very close eye on this value right here. Basically, anytime it gets to about half, I start looking to retreat from any situation I'm in. Just above that, safe. That denotes that safe mode is on. So if I saw an enemy, it would stop me from moving until I reacted with it in some way. Mainly that you ignore it for a certain amount of time. We'll get back. We'll further into that. Comfortable. That's my temperature. So right now I am comfortable. I am neither hot nor cold. You'll see this tick down to chilly, cold, freezing, and the color will change accordingly, different shades of blue. And you'll see it tick up to warm, hot, burning, and different shades of red. Freshness, or weariness, I'm sorry, and fresh is how kind of physically tired we are, like our how physically tired our muscles are. So, you may run around your parking lot and be winded on stamina, but that'll come back in a couple of minutes. Weariness is something that takes longer to wear down, but it also takes longer to get back. So think of it as more of like an actual physical tiredness versus your stamina that's more dynamic. And different things, again, will cause your transition, your weariness transition. This will tick down, and then once it ticks down a whole level, it'll tick back up, and then you'll go down from weariness fresh to weary. And then it'll tick down again, and then it'll go down to tired, and I don't remember what all of them are, but the more times it ticks down and the further you get into the weariness, the higher you'll see this weary malice go up, and it makes normal actions wear on your weariness even further, causing your weariness to tick down faster. So it'll come to the point where if you let yourself become too weary, that even walking is just a huge undertaking because you're just so physically exhausted. And you can get that back by sleeping or by just not doing things for a time. Reading is one of my favorite things to do. You find a book, you sit down, you read a book for a couple hours, you can usually let your weariness tick back up. Location, that's self-explanatory. We're in evac shelter A23. How creative. Weather, it's clear. This usually isn't too big of a deal. At nighttime, it'll become more big of a deal. That's terrible grammar. A bigger deal, because the moon phases will determine how much light is out, and it'll determine how well you can see and how well your enemies can see. Speaking of that, there's the moon phase over to the right there. I don't really pay too much attention to this. You can just kind of walk outside and, oh, there's more light. There must be a full moon tonight. Your lighting, very dark, lit, whatever. If we move, further over, it's gonna stay probably very dark. But if we opened a window, it would be a different story. If we get next to this computer, you see lighting cloudy, because it's got a little bit of light coming off the computer monitor. Sound, how much sound you're making, that's basically how many spaces away something can hear you. So as I'm just walking 6 spaces away, anything can hear me. If I switch over to crouch, now it's only 3. But you can see that our activity is kind of fluttering between moderate and nothing. It's because being crouched and walking, I mean, go walk around your house crouched for 5 minutes. If you're my age, your legs are going to start hurting. You're going to be like, why am I doing this? Oh, because some idiot on the internet told me to. But that's what that is. Weapon, fists. Self-explanatory. Style refers to a martial arts or combat style. Oops. So right now, I don't have any styles. But as the game goes on, you can find books that will teach you things, or if you get into enough fights, you'll pick up what's called brawling, which that is what it sounds like. It's just bar brawling. But it is more effective, and each kind of combat style will have its own list of maneuvers that go along with it with certain triggers, but that's a whole nother thing. It is spring. It's day 61. Seasons are 90 days. This is by design. You could start at day 1 in spring, but it's going to be very cold because it's basically just swapped over from winter. So there'll be snow on the ground, and it'll be cold, and it's harder to survive if you start 2/3 of the way into spring. The weather's usually a little nicer. It's a little easier to survive. And then we have our time of day. It's 8:01 a.m. Every time we move, it takes about a second to move a space. So time will tick, but as long as I could sit here for 10 hours just like this, as long as I don't move, time doesn't tick, nothing happens. Down below it, you can see the cardinal directions. If there are any enemies or things that we're not sure of, they'll show up here. So it'll have like maybe a little green Z on the north if there's a zombie to the north of us. Lets you kind of keep track of what's there. And then we have our mini map of the area down here that's much bigger than this little tiny one up here. This one I tend to rely on a lot. You'll see a lot of enemies, and you'll be able to see the terrain further than your eyeballs can see. And then down here we have a little bit of a combat log, or just a log in general, that says, we started running, we started walking, but it'll tell us a bunch of other information in here. Keep an eye on this. It's super important if you're trying to figure out what's going on. And you can take your time to read it because turn-based game. All right, so that's the basic HUD. And I'll show off some more of the keys and other things probably in another video. I'll probably do it more organically, like just as it comes up. Oh, here's this menu and let's talk about it. Because I want to get a little deeper into this before I run out of time. So first things first, what are we going to do? How do we survive? We know the HUD. We know our character's stats, but we're still not sure what to do. So one of the first things I like to do, because if you took Survivor and Evac-E, you're going to start out in a shelter, so your start is going to be very, very similar to this one. It may be laid out differently. There may be graffiti on the walls and broken windows, but it's going to be very, very similar. So the first thing I like to do is you can talk to this NPC. If you walk up to him and hit E, if he's the only thing there you can interact with, it'll automatically do it. Otherwise, it'll ask you what direction you want to interact. You could talk to them. You can examine them. You can try to steal from them. I don't recommend doing that. You can examine their wounds. Perfectly healthy. And there's a bunch of dialogue in here that you can go through. The things that I really like to do are, can I do anything for you? He'll give you a quest. Okay. He wants a piece of software off his computer, need a USB. Okay, that's great. You can ask him to share some equipment. And you see how it's got my skill checks up there. Persuade 100%. Well, I am helping you out. I always try to do that one. But you could lie. Our character's not a very good liar. Remember, we took Truth Teller. We could try to intimidate. But 95% of the time, this is what you're going to get. They have nothing to give. But you never know. He might give you a paper wrapper or something. So that's great. Thanks. See you later. Now, because it's dark, we can't see very well. So you kind of have to move close to see if there's items laying around. So we'd see that item on the counter there with the 3 little green bars next to it. You can examine and we can get items. 20 wrappers of protein rations, and you can look through all of this. It'll tell you how much volume it takes, how much it weighs, its length, what it does. But basically, these are protein bars. So we have a food supply. That's very important. Over here, we have a water supply. We got 7 bottles of sealed water. Not that water would go bad, but things that are sealed don't go bad. So we've got food, we've got water. There's some lockers over here. We've got standard fare for emergency shelters. We've got a little bit more food, an emergency jacket, a lighter, a folded emergency blanket, some plastic nonsense. Kind of got the same stuff here. There's a couple of doors, a couple of windows, and there's a downstairs. So we can go downstairs. You hit the right caret, it'll go down. The left caret will go up, aka shift period, shift comma. And the basements are a little bit different. Wow. So pliers, actually a very good find. Tools in this game are super important, and you need them to do a lot of advanced stuff. And in many cases, you can't craft them. You have to find them. So this is pretty cool. Some other stuff here. Some doors. A lot of times you'll find soap, which is a very good find. You can use it to clean up clothes, and specifically first aid kits, which will have adhesive bandages, aspirin, medical tape. Sometimes they'll have antiseptic. So this is all very good stuff. Some more soap, some bleach, more first aid kits, some more soap. And then out here, these are all laid out the same. They'll have this horseshoe bench around the outside. Sometimes there'll be stuff here. Sometimes, yeah, see, here we go. There's a dust mask, a poncho, some more rations. Good stuff, good stuff. We'll clean all this stuff up a little later. Oops, I'm not on the stairs. But for right now, it's just kind of showing you around. There's also doors and windows. One of the important things to do right off the bat, you can actually see what's outside the bunker before you look outside. You hit M to open your map. And we can see that this bunker is kind of away from the city, but there is a city here called New Milford. And we can see that this is blinking because that's that guy's quest that he gave us. There's a bunch of different houses here. We've got a restaurant, a butcher shop. You can see in the upper right what all these are. Some of them are color-coded. Deep red is a gun store. These blue gas pumps are gas stations. Good sources of food. A library is fantastic. And in fact, it looks like there's 2 of them. Good source of books. Knowledge is power. A bowling alley. We've got another, oh, this is a garage. There'll probably be some tools there. A hardware store, some tools there as well. Wow, this is a great little town. Farmhouse, I love farmhouses. They're usually good bases of operation. And we've got some silos, may or may not be anything there. A cemetery. Okay, there's some woods down to the south. Interesting. Now that shows us our surroundings, but it doesn't tell us if there's enemies nearby. So what you can do is you can walk up to these, and this is a window. Might be hard to see from the tile set in the light, but this is a window. So we can look out to see what's out there. What you're going to want to do is interact, examine, E, and you can peek through the closed curtains, and it'll give you a view out, and you can move the cursor around and kind of see what's out here. We've got some manure, but no enemies, no enemies. So you could look around and see everything there. And this is all kind of things I've been talking about leading up to what I kind of use to go through my first 24 hours in the game. And that's, if you've never heard of it, it's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'll put a graphic of this up. But what this is this gentleman, Abraham Harold Maslow, was a psychologist who studied positive human qualities and lives of exemplary people, created the hierarchy of human needs, and expressed his theories in the book Motivation and Personality. That's all well and good, but the way it applies to this game is it actually has a pyramid. And at the bottom of that pyramid, the most basic thing that a human being needs to survive: air, food, water, sleep, using the bathroom, and some other stuff that doesn't apply to this game. But we've got food and water covered, right? You don't have to worry about using the bathroom. We've got air. That's not a problem unless you're underwater. We don't have a place to sleep yet that's really comfortable. We could sleep on a bench, but we're going to try to very early on build like a straw bed. Above that, we have safety. Safety and security, which is security of the body, employment. We don't have to worry about resources, morality, family, health, property, that kind of stuff. And not all of this is going to apply, but what I'm trying to convey is once you have your basal human needs taken care of, you've got food, you've got water, okay? Now we're moving up. We have shelter. This place looks pretty safe. We're going to look through all the windows, and we've looked around. Doesn't look like there's anything nearby. This place is probably pretty safe, and we're going to work on fortifying it. Then above that, we can go to the next step, which is like love, belonging, friendship, family, that kind of stuff. We're not too terribly worried about that, but that leads into basically going out into the larger world. So you start very simply and then work into more complex stuff. It's really easy to lose sight of, well, I want to work on this project. I want to make a deathmobile, which is a really popular thing for Cataclysm people to do. But then you realize, oh, I don't have a steady food supply, and now my character's starving. So you got to keep that kind of stuff in mind. Work on the stuff to maintain your life first, your food and water, and your physical safety and security before moving into other things. So that's going to be it for the first episode, or the second episode. We covered some good topics. We didn't get to everything I wanted to cover, but that's the beautiful thing about a YouTube series, is it'll just be in the next video. So thanks everybody for coming and hanging out. I hope you learned something, or at least found me entertaining. If you did, please leave a like. Please feel free to hit that subscribe button if you want to get notified of future streams. Leave a comment if something I said was wrong, or if you have further questions or whatever, or you just want to say hi. That's all cool too. Check out my links to my other socials that'll be in the description, and come check me out on Twitch or Twitter or Instagram or any other of those things you may or may not consume, and I hope to see you next time.